Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Really wonderful to see so many faces here in this studio. Hope you all are comfortable, and thank you if you're joining us from elsewhere in the world as well. I want to start with a reminder that we're meeting on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot Nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. And the staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw acknowledge that we're living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. And thank you all again for being here. It really means the world, and I know it means the world to these writers to see so many folks coming out and supporting their work. So thank you so much. My name's Levi. I manage the artist residency programs here at Jack Straw Cultural Center. We have 3 artist residency programs: the writers program, the artist support program, and the new media gallery program. Each year for the writers, 12 writers are selected by a different invited curator. Our curator this year is the wonderful Claudia Castro. She was actually a Jack Straw writer in 2014, has been a board member and a teaching artist with us, so it's just been really wonderful to have her as part of the team in this way. For our residency programs, we receive funding from the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, the Washington State Arts Commission, the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, and individual contributors. I think pretty much all of you now qualify as individual contributors just being here, so we really do appreciate that at whatever amount that comes in. And yeah, this is the second in a series of 3 readings. Hope you'll come back next Friday. I also want to mention our partners in this project. So this is the beginning of the public readings. These writers have received training. They've been recorded in our studios. There's a bunch of things that will come out from that you'll hear over the coming months. But we also, after this, present them in other live readings around the community. So one of our partners is Northwest Folklife. We're doing an event May 24th at Folklife Festival. There will be improvising musicians responding in the moment to the work of 5 of these writers. Should be a really exciting event. We have other readings. We're going to have 2 readings at Hugo House, 2 readings at Elliott Bay, and also outside of Capitol Hill, but people like those places. But yeah, so readings all over the place, so do keep an eye out for these writers, and we're going to combine them in different combinations. And yeah, this is the beginning of an exciting several months of readings, so I wanted to mention that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our curator and host, Claudia Castro.
Buenas noches y bienvenidos a todos. Good evening and welcome everyone. What a thrill to have you all in the room, to have a packed house. It's just really lovely. I know some of you were here last week. Thank you for joining us. I have been a part of this reading series since I myself was a writer, a Jack Straw writer, and I always say it's the best reading in town, hands down. And we have a lot of excellent readings in Seattle. I'm aware of that, but this truly, to me, is one of the highlights of the year, of the reading calendar and the literary doings of Seattle. I wanted to start by mentioning a little card that most of you found on your seats. These are small broadsides. They're very beautiful, that I have been a part producing since I was Seattle's civic poet. And that was, my God, that was like 13 or 14 years ago. 14, thank you. Thank you, Phoebe. So I have been putting together small poems that fit in your pocket to honor Put a Poem in Your Pocket Day, which is part of the celebrations of National Poetry Month. And as the years went by, the first one that I made, I really did I drew it myself and I photocopied it and I did bomb readings at cafes that let me just show up and read the poems. Then along the way, I started partnering with Partners in Print, which is an incredible nonprofit organization, and we have been producing these amazing little broadsides ever since. I curate the poem. Most of the years, they are youth poets who are featured. This year is no different. Olivia Woodard is a a student at Evergreen State College, an amazing poet, and we were very happy to have her contribution. And the title of the project is Poesía para Todos, Poetry for Everyone, and they're always translated. This year is from English to Spanish, but we've had Rohingya to English. We've had Perla Mendoza sitting right here. Last year, I believe you had a poem and we translated from Spanish to English. We've had Korean to English, Arabic to English. So I brought a few. I'll try to bring some more next time, but that's what this is about. This is in celebration of National Poetry Month, and it's a little poem to carry in your pocket. Tonight, we'll hear two poets and two prose writers share their work. I want to note again, as I did this past Friday, that as the curator of this year's program, the selection process was really arduous. And by the way, that's not to dissuade anyone from applying. Please apply. And I think all of the previous curators would say that about receiving the applications and making the really difficult decision to invite only 12 writers of the many dozens of applications that we receive every year. Thank you again to Jack Straw's entire team, to John Rabinovitz, its fearless executive director, to Levi Fuller, who's just amazing and does so much for Jack Straw, not just running this particular program, but Jack Straw does many things in the community, and Levi is behind the organization of all of that. Thank you also to Daniel Gunter and Tony Williams, who are engineering tonight. And with that, let us welcome the first of our evening readers. And that would be Elissa Favero. Elissa Favero crafts beautiful essays that often center visual art and natural and built places. She conveys with care and precision observations, associations, memories, and in so doing reveals her thought process and shares her extensive knowledge of the literary and plastic arts. I think of Elissa as an excellent ambassador of the essay form. In her hands, the personal, associative, and expansive qualities possible in the essay glitter and shine. Her essays and book and exhibition reviews have appeared in Ecotone, Terrain.org, the Rumpus, River Teeth Journal's Beautiful Things series, and Temporary Art Review. Elissa is also the winner of the 2023 Newfound Prose Prize for Writing, Exploring Place and Identity, and her chapbook, Children of Rivers and Trees, An Abecedarian, was published by Newfound in 2024. And with that, let us give a warm welcome to tonight's first reader, Elissa Favero.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks to our mighty cohort of writers, all the wonderful folks here at Jack Straw, and also all of you for being here. It's really good to be in your company. So I'll be reading a piece from A Manuscript in Progress. It's a collection of essays I'm calling The Queen is Dead. These essays explore the lives of women, myself included, and also visual art broadly defined. The essay I have in the anthology, Still Life with Asparagus, is about a 19th century still life painting and a long friendship with Romaika, who was a housemate when we were both new to Seattle. The one I'm reading tonight takes as its subject my teenage fascination with a film I'm hoping some of you may know. The city becomes her. A cab drives down Fifth Avenue. In the lull of a New York City dawn, it is the only vehicle moving. The taxi slows and stops before a handsome building of granite and limestone, and a waifish Audrey Hepburn steps out as Holly Golightly. In her long black gown, with ropes of glittering costume jewelry at her neck and hair swept into a bejeweled bouffant, Holly is still dressed for a night on the town. She examines the jewelry store's window displays, chandeliers from inside Tiffany & Company, repeating the glittering splash and drape of her necklace in the glass's reflections. She lingers, coffee and pastry in hand, before turning to walk to her apartment on the Upper East Side. By the time I saw Blake Edwards' 1961 film, Breakfast at Tiffany's, I already knew many versions of Audrey Hepburn. As a spoiled princess, falling in love with a disguised reporter and a city in Roman holiday. As a besotted young woman returned to Long Island with a chef's training and Parisian glamour in Sabrina. And as a chic widow investigating her husband's death in Paris alongside a debonair Cary Grant in Charade. As a teenager, I eagerly consumed Hepburn's affects, personas, and storylines, observing and trying on, with no deliberate effort, her good-naturedness and continental elegance, her combination of girlish vulnerability and pluck, and her understated sexuality. With Hepburn framed within them, film screens held up a kind of mirror to the woman I wanted to become. Even now, decades later, when I see how Hepburn expresses delight, or when I listen to the melody of her voice, I sometimes feel as though I'm looking at or hearing myself. Other actors appear in Breakfast at Tiffany's, of course. I didn't yet recognize Patricia Neal from other films, and so she became, for me, synonymous with her character, a rich woman keeping a younger man. I thought her queenly and possibly treacherous. Now, so many years later, and more sensitive to the complex ways sex, love, and money can intersect, I think I see her more clearly. A cool, older woman juggling a controlling husband and a young lover beholden to her generous financial support. Compared to Hepburn's sprightly 31, Neal was 34 years old when Breakfast at Tiffany's began filming. Yet there's nothing girlish about Neal's character, Mrs. Emily Eustace Phelanson, or as Holly's neighbor Paul Varjet calls her, Tooey. I now love the scene where Tooey is shown seated, feet up, in an emerald ensemble, and petting a large, elaborately coiffed poodle while she conducts her affairs via telephone. A stylish girl, Paul puts it mildly, as he's dumping her for Holly. One part in Breakfast at Tiffany's that has always been and remains awful is that yellow-faced performance by Mickey Rooney as a Japanese photographer and Holly's upstairs neighbor, Mr. Yuniyoshi. Buck-toothed, poorly sighted, and clumsy, he is a caricature of a man. Truman Capote's 1958 novella, on which the film is loosely based, is set mostly during World War II, when the United States government incarcerated more than 100,000 Japanese immigrants and Japanese American citizens in remote camps in western United States and beyond, from Hawaii all the way to Ellis Island. I wonder now how Mr. Yuniyoshi had come to be in New York City, but neither the novella nor the film that followed seems much interested in him other than as a bit character or a racist joke. I'd suggest we cut out the hateful Mickey Rooney scenes and splice in a few more of Neal and her resplendent plaid capes, upturned collars, and headscarves. Yes, more of this woman who commands every room she enters. A woman with autonomy and sexual agency can have her heart broken too, though the film doesn't consider things from that angle either. But in removing Mr. Yuniyoshi and adding more of Tooey, I would be excising the only character of color and inserting more of another white woman. The impulse makes me realize how Breakfast at Tiffany's has always been for me, for better and for worse, a study in femininity. I love films where we watch women by themselves and on the move. When I was not yet 20, I saw the 2002 erotic thriller Unfaithful in theaters. The scene I remember best is Diane Nguyen on a commuter train on her way home to a New York City suburb. I find it again online. She's remembering the sexual encounter she's just had with a near stranger. Dressed in a modest trench coat, she touches her chest and face and moves her fingers through her hair as a lover might. Thrill, desire, horror, and shame play across her face. Then there's Rada Blank's stalled playwright on a Harlem bus early in the 2020 film, The 40-Year-Old Version, not to be confused with the 2005 film with Steve Carell with a very similar title. Blank's character is late. She's offended the bus driver. She's sipping on her enormous diet drink. Now she's growing impatient as the bus stops again and again. Embarrassing words are exchanged. Others are all around, but this scene is a tightly focused character study. We root for Radha in the midst of her self-conscious, self-indulgent, grieving, funny, can't-get-it-togetherness. Or I think of Julianne Moore in the 2018 film Gloria Bell, a remake of a Chilean movie from 5 years earlier. Gloria is a regular at a disco in Los Angeles, dancing joyfully among strangers. But the disco music follows her everywhere. It's turned up on her car radio as she sings along. In other parts of the movie, it sounds grandly, overlaid as the soundtrack to her life. The film affectionately follows Gloria every place she goes, from car to office job to disco to apartment to bikini wax appointment to yoga class to date. The circumstances of her life are difficult and tender and mundane and life-affirming and funny, and Gloria dances and dances and dances some more. There's a scene I thought I remembered from Breakfast at Tiffany's that could belong in this urban woman on the go montage. Near the end of the film, Holly has broken things off with Paul and is preparing to leave New York to marry her rich lover and become the future First Lady of Brazil. Or so she's telling herself and anyone who will listen. It's only 8 years before Midnight Cowboy's portrayal of urban grime, indifference, and alienation. But Breakfast at Tiffany's New York City is still beautiful and fairly kind to a hustler like Holly, at least in the Hollywood telling of her story. A New York playgirl, a cafe society type. This is how Paramount Pictures Publicity described Holly's character 10 months ahead of the film's release. It's euphemism operating as PR spin. Likely the studio and certainly the Production Code Administration would have been pleased that the cinematic telling of Holly's sex work went over my head as a young woman. Capote's novella is much franker. In the book, one of Holly's neighbors tells her to do your whoring elsewhere when she sees Holly embracing a man in their shared hallway. Importantly, Holly should be alone in the scene I thought I recalled. We've already encountered her by herself a few times, the famous opening and later reading through a stack of books at the New York Public Library, trying to learn about her would-be South American home. There should also, I thought, be a scene of her walking through the city on her own in the late afternoon light. The dark metal and tinted glass of a Mies van der Rohe office building or some other sleek skyscraper in the background. The shots are there, all right, but I had misremembered them before a recent rewatch set the record straight. Instead of just Holly, there's also Paul, accompanying her, mooning over her, feeling generally sorry for himself at his imminent loss. Well, he's intruding, I thought on this latest viewing. Years from now, years and years, I'll be back, Holly tells him as they walk, the camera panning across the city skyline. Me and my 9 Brazilian brats, she clarifies. I'll bring them back all right, because they must see this. Oh, I love New York. Her face turns up toward the buildings and sky. The words are fine, mostly, but they're add-ons to a series of shots I had remembered but do not exist. Holly alone, a woman moving by herself through a city. When I moved to Seattle in my mid-20s, I came upon a downtown building that looked as if it could have appeared in Breakfast at Tiffany's. New York City architecture critic Ada Louise Huxtable, who must herself have trained and bussed and cabbed and walked all over cities in her decades on the job, called the 50-story bank tower, the tallest in the city when it was erected in 1969, quote, one of the most urbane buildings in the country, end quote. At night, the clear glass of the elegant double-story entrance glows. A generous open space, now called Safeco Plaza, spreads out in front. Here, I thought then, and still think now, almost 20 years later, is a stage for city living. In good weather, I have often planted myself along the edge of the enormous, well-tended garden beds there and watched people go by. I might have been a kind of Holly Golightly, admiring the city's bustle and press. Where were all these people coming from? Where were they going? From my temporary post, I've also studied Safeco Plaza's permanently sited neighbors, including the sharp metal bracing of the F5 tower, designed, I've read, to resemble an abstracted silhouette of Holly from Breakfast at Tiffany's. I think I can pick out the jutting angles of Audrey Hepburn posed for a publicity still. Black gloves extending up past her elbows and an extravagantly long cigarette holder clenched between her teeth. People sitting here in previous years may have watched younger versions of me traipse by. In my first months in Seattle as a graduate student, I glided past toward the bus stop and home, too late and a little too drunk after a date. Over the years, I commuted to a nearby museum internship that later became a job. I usually wore ballet flats, though in winter I sported rain boots and carried a brightly patterned umbrella. Sometimes as I walked by Safeco Plaza, I would think of Audrey's Holly. In fact, I realize now I was reinventing her, erasing the damage and demeaning realities of her life to make her into the person I wanted her to be, spirited and self-possessed. I didn't want her to belong to me like Paul does. Or maybe I did. I wanted to internalize a version of her for myself. Charming, poised, and a beautiful woman not yet quite grown up. Here we were, I thought, both young women far away from what had once been home, both newly part of a city's grit and glitter, its dirtiness and dazzle, each of us one of its countless crisscrossing stories. On a recent visit, I stopped to take a photograph of the commanding bronze forms that make up Henry Moore's three-piece sculpture, Vertebrae, installed in Safeco Plaza's south corner in 1971. The enormous shapes suggest a reclining nude, a woman, I can only assume, who has been reduced to polished bones scattered like jacks. Looking at the photo now, I can make out my own blur in the polished granite base. Tortoiseshell sunglasses, cranberry-colored coat, hands raised to hold and press click. In the imaginary film version of my life, a camera tracks my approach and the action of me pulling out and positioning my phone. Then a close-up shot pulls back to follow the direction of my gaze. In this cinematic telling, another figure would soon appear in the frame, though in reality, I didn't notice her until I examined my photograph later. There she is, a woman of indeterminate age. She wears white sneakers, a knee-length black skirt, and a white blouse. She strides, her arm pulled back in motion, as she turns to look at Moore's sculpture above. Or is she looking at me? By the time I turned around, she had already gone, continuing, I presume, to make her way down the busy downtown street. Thank you.
Thank you, Elissa, for that wonderful essay. I have to say, hearing you made me feel like I want to embody Gloria. And who knows, maybe I'll just play disco the whole way home after the reading. Can we give Elissa another round of applause? Thank you. Our next reader is Alejandro Pérez-Cortés. Alejandro has been writing and publishing poems since 1996, when his first poem was published in Colima, Mexico, where he is from. In 2020, Alejandro won the Paz Poetry Prize. His manuscript was titled, Ima and Coli Are the Tree That Was Never a Seed, and in Spanish, Ima y Coli, El Árbol que Nunca Fue Semilla. And if you could tell, Ima and Coli spell out Colima, which is the town where Alejandro is from. The book was published by Akashic Books. The annual award comes from the National Poetry Series and the Miami Book Fair. And I actually think that you were there at the Miami Book Fair reading from your book, right? Ima and Coli's poems are hard to define. What is clear is that they are brilliantly innovative and dazzling to read. If you don't know of this book, I encourage you to seek it out. it will not disappoint you. It is really an amazing, amazing book. From the voice and construction of the poems to their concerns, Alejandro's writing reminds me of the Chilean poet Nicanor Parra, who creates what he calls anti-poems. Like Parra, Alejandro plays with the absurd, masterfully blending irony, symbol, and metaphor while making biting yet humorous critiques of the times we live in. Alejandro has a new book of poems coming out later this year with Colibrí Editores, La Metaforista, El Cuerpo y Otros Poemas, She, the Metaphorist, The Corpse, and Other Poems. Let us welcome Alejandro Pérez-Cortés.
Yo hablo español. If you don't know what I said, I speak Spanish. I'm an immigrant, and as an immigrant, I'm a person who had to learn English when I moved to Seattle. Sometimes I start writing in Spanish, sometimes in English, sometimes I mix both languages. The first poem I'm reading tonight, Mr. Cash is asking us, once again, to tell him the story of how we Mexicans get rid of the termites. He has a first name and a last name. Neither his first name nor his last name is Cash, but he pays us cash. Paying us cash, according to him, is his way to take revenge on a government he dislikes. He says, it doesn't matter if it's the Republican elephants or the Democratic donkeys. They were, they are, and they will be in power, and they are in bed together. He's proud of his Spanish, but he confuses his verbs. He says, in my heart, I'm inside of you, instead of saying, I am one of you. And he continues, do not let my white, pale skin distract you, nor my blue eyes. Do not let them misguide you, nor my blonde hair scare you, because in my heart, I am inside of you. Rumor has it that Mr. Cash traces his roots all the way back to 1847. And he is the son of the sons of the sons of the sons of German immigrants who were born in California when California was Mexico. I am inside of you. I am inside of the bronze race, he says all the time, instead of, I am one of the bronze race. The story he wants to hear is a stupid one. The story about how termites stone each other to death makes him wallow in laughter. The story goes like this. Put tequila over the infested wood. Put tequila, lots of it, but no vodka, no whiskey, no sake, no cognac. The spirit of the agave is what does the miracle, the purging, the cleaning, the killing, the slaughter. Then smash and crush obsidian rock and spread it all over the infested wood that you bathed in tequila. Once the termites are drunk, they will stone each other to death. The story, as we said, is stupid, but he wallows in laughter. Wallows, 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 laughter, laughter, laughter. Then he bubbles, drowned in mezcal. He stammers, drowned in mezcal. Bubbles, stammers, wallows, laughter, bubbles, stammers. Fucking war. Fucking war. His post-traumatic stress disorder tore apart his family. We are his family now. He says to us, I'm inside you. I'm inside of you in my heart. I'm inside of the Mexican bronze race. Before falling asleep, he begs an elderly woman who does not speak English to bless him. Bless me. Bless me, Grandma. She replies in Nahuatl. Tlahi como palehuya totlanohotl, which means, may our words heal you. Then Mr. Cash falls asleep on the dirt of the fields. He sleeps next to us, his Mexican family. Tomorrow, he will pay us cash again. There has been a lot of violence in my family. To be more specific, gun violence. And this is a topic I record over and over. Once upon a time, there was a gunshot. A shot that suddenly finds itself hitting a forehead. There's no certainty about what a shot thinks when it suddenly finds itself in the least expected place. Perhaps the first thing that the shot understands is empathy. From empathy to existentialism, there's only one step. The shot becomes an existentialist shot. Like many paradoxes in life, it is difficult for the shot to know what makes it a shot. Is gunpowder the shot? Is the case in the shot? Is the firing pin the shot? Is the warhead the shot? Is the gun trigger the shot? Is all of the above the shot? Does the shot itself exist? Or is it like the riddle of the Buddha? The riddle of the tree falling into the solitude of the forest without anyone hearing it. If no one hears the shot, does the shot exist? If nothing or no one is hit and the shot maintains an endless journey, is it a shot that misses its target or simply a stray bullet? If the gun fires itself, is it a dissident shot or an act of free will by the gun? So, what if the gun has been fired accidentally? If it is the case that the gun has been fired by accident, is the shot a metaphor for a miscarriage where the poor mother gives birth to a dead baby? In a room, sitting in a circle, there is a discussion in the manner of a group therapy. The gunpowder, the casing, the firing pin, the warhead, the trigger of the pistol, and the shot itself. Everybody is there. They argue and meditate about what exactly a shot is. This type of meeting, as expected, generates instability, an overcharge of electrons and protons, an imbalance in electromagnetism. The result is always the same when it comes to instability. There's no implosion capable of creating another parallel universe that changes history. There is an explosion. There's no implosion. There is an explosion. There's no implosion. The shot resigns itself to its fate. The parallel universe becomes this irrational world where we live in, our everyday reality. Lemniscate starts again. On the front page of a newspaper, this beautiful morning, we are reading, body found with a shot in the forehead. Lemniscate begins again. Once upon a time, there was a shot. The next poem I'm reading, it's not part of the anthology. Sometimes I think I should have been born as an elephant and not as a human. Sometimes I think I should have been born as an elephant and not as a human. But do not think of me as a circus elephant. I would have liked to be Hannibal of Carthage's elephant. Surus, that was the name of Hannibal's elephant. The drawings that have been preserved for thousands of years depict Surus as an elephant with one single tusk. If I had been Hannibal's elephant, I would have been in the Punic Wars. I would have said to Hannibal then, Hannibal, ignore your father and forget about Rome. If you want to give Rome a bitter spoonful, ignore her. If you ignore Rome, you will make her bleed with rage. Look at my fang, Hannibal. It should be beautiful, but it stinks of Roman soldiers' blood. It could be the case that I am indeed Hannibal's elephant, and Hannibal is preparing me for war. And because of that, he has given me wine. And I am so drunk that I am hallucinating. I am a human in the year 2026. And I am pretending to be a poet, and I am reading a joke of a poem in front of an audience. I'm an elephant. That's what I believe. But living according to one's belief is a risk, like the suicidal woman who in her farewell letter believes that her God, who sees beyond the heart, will understand her. And I'm not talking about my mother. She did not leave us any note. Does it matter that she did not leave any note for us? What matters are the days when I used to go out to look for the source of the river. But I always found the mouth. And when I went down to look for the mouth, I found the source. I was fed up. So I say to myself, this is living upside down. And when I was about to throw myself into the river spoke to me. The river told me, rivers neither begin nor end. All rivers are one, and they always come back. In the manner of lemniscate, the mouth of the river is the source, and the end is the beginning. And I wrote it. Rivers neither begin nor end. All rivers are one, and they always come back. And the poets told me, maybe the future will prove you right. The future. I peed myself laughing because I know that the only way to get to the future is by walking to the past. I was reading Hamlet, and it wasn't clear to me whether I was reading about the past or the present. In short, everything would be easier for me if instead of being Alejandro, I would have been Hannibal's elephant. But I don't know if I could have helped Hannibal to erase from his heart that revenge against Rome. And I said that because a day will come when the cathedral will become a mosque, and years later, the mosque will become a synagogue, and then a cathedral again, and once again a mosque, and many elephants later, a synagogue again. And this will be repeated for many years. Synagogue, cathedral, mosque, cathedral, synagogue. And in the end, all of us, humans and elephants, we all will taste the defeat. Okay, I don't want to take anybody's time. So this is the very last one. I stop. I write. No letter belongs to us. I halt. Rats have imagination. Who among us does not ache to understand their secret language? No grapheme, no character belongs to us. Rats have imagination. A research group has developed a novel system combining virtual reality and brain-machine interface to investigate the rat's decision-making. Their findings suggest that much like humans, rats are able to think about places and objects that are not directly before them. And using their mind, rats imagine walking toward a location or moving a distant object to a specific spot. Yes, rats have imagination. This discovery is the very light humanity has gone blind seeking. Blessed be the rats. Pity the poor poets, and the short story writers too. The novelists won't escape either. Pity the men of letters, one and all. I write, not every light was conceived to illuminate. There are lights meant to guide one along paths or through mountains. And there are lights meant to set those paths and mountains screaming in flames. I always carry a few morsels of chocolate with me. Chocolate as bait. Chocolate flavored like cat whiskers. I'm buying the rat's affection. I write these lines in support of the rat's vengeance against the cats. I'm starving for the rat's stories. It is precisely because of the darkness that I read these lines so clearly. To rat or not to rat? Rat is the question. Not even a letter belongs to us. Hence, I now maintain that every light is different. And when I say that, the poets came and asked me, are you speaking of the different colors of light? It's not of color lights that I speak. I write, I halt, I pile up words onto this lane, words that are strangers to one another, distinct from one another, forced to share this single stanza. I halt, I write, I stare at the letter R, I anchor on the letter T, a ritual to find the invisible. There are lights that, before ever becoming lights, were paths. And one day, they died as heavy as mountains. I'm speaking neither of my father nor of my mother. Just as it is written, for parents shall forsake their sons and their daughters and become a single cry. What society has joined together, let no one put asunder. Now that has been proved that rats have imagination, one is able to find what one cannot see. How? There are lights for abandoning paths or mountains. There are lights for setting the path against the mountain. And the poets came again and asked me, what did you call the light that was seen from outer space? The one generated by 160 bombs dropped in 10 minutes. I have christened that light blasphemy. I halt. I write. I halt again. No grapheme, no character belongs to us. The invisible is within our reach, and soon there will be rats flying to Sweden to pin a medal on themselves, and the stories they will write will be marvelous. Thank you.
Gracias, Alejandro. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give Alejandro another round. I tell you, that book, Ima and Coley, The Tree That Was Never a Seed, is an incredible feat. And I am so looking forward to reading your next work, Alejandro. I also, as Alejandro was reading, I was reminded, and actually Tony Williams is with us engineering, and he recorded the podcast between my conversation with Alejandro. As part of the program, we have taped podcast interviews with each of the writers. And every single engagement, every single conversation was very different, very different. And some of them went over time. Some of them were shorter. They're all really they're a reflection of the writers themselves. So of course the conversations that we had traveled in different ways. Alejandro and I ended up talking. I think poor Tony was very good staying with us during this far-ranging conversation that explored fiction and politics and lies and Alejandro's teacher who encouraged him to be a writer. I say all of this to invite you to tune in to the podcast when they come out, which will be in early summer. And you could actually go back and hear writers in Seattle and beyond in the archive. So Jack Straw has really amazing digital sound archives. And you could really, I mean, if you were a scholar, you could really do some research by listening and researching these writers over time. All right. So please seek those out in the summer when they come out. Our next writer is Kevin Dean. Kevin Dean is a fiction writer, but about a year ago, poetry came to him unbidden. Kevin comes to us from Southwest Virginia via the country of Egypt, where he wrote, was an editor, and studied Arabic. Kevin's poems swept me with their quiet lyricism and longing. With these meditative poems, Kevin seeks connections between the self and place and between the self and the historical moment. These poems also consider the self and its political positioning and the implications therein, and address the shortcomings of language to express the ineffable and grotesque. And that was part of our conversation. Kevin tells us, quote, "I'm searching for connection and clarity across geography and time, and that's the kind of poet I want to be, someone who makes people feel less alone in troubled times. There's solidarity in community. Let us confront the unmovable and hold horror and joy in our hearts end in the same line." We are glad for the journey that brought you here, Kevin. Please let us welcome Kevin Dean. Actually, because did that go up?
It's fine.
There we go.
Hello, everybody. This feels like a recurring dream. Me, these drapes, and everybody I know in the city where I live. I'm reading some poems tonight from the collection that I've been working on for the past 2.5 years or so, and I'm excited to share them with you. Whoops. Whistling into the future. I'm watching a man rinse a boat engine as his boy swishes a rod by the dock. A woman walks over, waves to them, says to me, "Pretty lousy, right?" She means the fading light on the bay, the pines on the far bank where an unknown bugler plays taps at sundown. I tell her I've never seen anything worse. She grins, those apple-eating teeth. I know them. The group photo and the old general store calendar hanging by my desk. 2008. Her hair was longer, the boy just pollen on the wind. So much is still arriving. Like the shining coho the man pulls from a bag. Fish and family cross the road together, a tune on the man's lips, thinking about dinner.
Thank you, Kevin, for those beautiful poems. I love that line, so much is still arriving. Love it. And isn't it true? So much is still arriving. Can we give Kevin another round of applause? So we're here at the end. One more reader. Oh, I think you took my notes.
Did I?
Yes. Yes. We found them. Somehow my laundry ticket is. I know I need to go pick up my dry cleaning. I know that. And the universe is letting me know I have to do it. How did that get here? I don't know. But there it is. All right. So our last reader is Diane Nguyen. Yesterday, the New York Times published an opinion piece written by Anna Louise Sussman titled, "Why So Few Babies? We Might Have Overlooked the Biggest Reason of All." Tonight, here in Seattle, Diane Nguyen will read for us a piece that is in conversation with and at the same time expands the New York Times article. "I want to be a mother," writes Diane, "but as an artist beholden to the demands of capitalism, I'm not sure what that looks like. The millennial generation has experienced coming of age into an era of deep losses. In a world that feels dying, caring for life is an act of resistance and safety. There is healing to be had in this expression of care," says Diane. As the firstborn American child of Southeast Asian refugees and an openly transgender woman, Diane's work revolves around the interrogation of the intersections of her identities and lived experience. Quote, "Cultural fracture and erasure, transness and queerness for many of us, these are the parallel stories about estrangement, alienation, and masking our identities to fit in," writes Diane. I'm so glad to have Diane's voice in this year's anthology. Her varied experiences as a classical musician and music teacher, as a former software engineer, as a trans woman, as an emerging writer, her prose enriches us, her readers, in the process. Please let us welcome our last reader of the evening, Diane Nguyen.
Hello, I am Diane. I have an iPad because I'm so young and hip. I'm a millennial. This is the piece that's in the anthology called Viewing Windows. It is, you can think of 3 loosely connected vignettes. You will find this reading slightly edited from the one that's present in the anthology. So. A once friend of mine recounted her grandma telling her never to fall for a musician. You'll never be their first love. This might be my fatal flaw too, the pursuit of career. The way I fill out my calendar with appointments, the way the spaces look like places to fit practice, or writing, or meetings, or project planning. How immutable each entry feels. And I find the phrase so easily. I'm busy. I used to be an engineer. That kind of money is a telescope that lets you see the horizon in focus. The freedom is like sailing in placid blue waters. You can traverse boundlessly with ease. Suddenly, my off-beaten path met with the road of the American dream. Suddenly, I was empowered with sincere ideations. Car, house, retirement, marriage, a family. I have to work, I said to both her and myself. Over dinners, I checked Slack messages across from her in restaurant booths. I brought my computer on camping trips. I dismissed the idea of traveling in the anxious wake of taking time off. I waved away her idea of going to Portland for a weekend, or Deception Pass, or La Conner, or her hometown in California. Then, summer, San Juan Island. We're trying to make it work. It's my birthday trip, she says again. In the shade, surrounded by trees on Mount Finlayson. My phone is an anchor in my pocket. The ringer. New York area code. Chest taut. The message is grainy, pushed through, and seething. We're going to have to let you go. Unemployed after a year, newly single after 5. I remained alone in the duplex. I blew through my savings to pay rent, liquidated assets I meant to save for retirement. Self-esteem and self-worth absented to the void left by 100 unanswered job applications. Eventually, I resigned, conceded my future in a career I had worked so hard to start. I could no longer afford to live in that apartment. The 900 square foot 2-bedroom, boxed in by 10-foot ceilings and 8-foot windows. The yard, which property management paid to be mowed. The garden and the beds I built with and for my ex. The posts that marked the trellis we used for beans and peas. The bed where we harvested an 8-foot tall wall of vibrant purple-red amaranth that our neighbors fawned for. The old cherry tree that reached into our yard and sprinkled pink-white flower petals on those perfect Seattle spring mornings when we would wake up, make coffee, and read or draw outside with our cat next to us on his harness. The echoes of a pandemic we spent laughing at the great and Hilda and holding anxious, bated breath for it to be over. The office where I started and ended a life-changing career. The bedroom where we fought on an IKEA bed frame we bought secondhand for $20 in Georgetown about how our relationship had been sexless for years since COVID isolation. The dining nook where we decided we were breaking up. The door frame we cried and held each other in, confused about just how much you could love and be loved and have it still hurt. If walls could talk, I guess. Back then, burnt out from being employed at a music school, I worked rigorously to change my career path to engineering. Now, burnt out from the tech job search, I resigned to support myself by teaching. It was easy to return. I kept a few students even during my short stay as a programmer. Eloise and I had been working together for roughly 4 years, from when she was 6 years old. When I transitioned my teaching to private practice, my apartment was out of the way for her family, and so I'd begun offering in-home lessons for an extra fee to cover the commute cost. Their dining table in the living room was a little window into the person she was. The books, the homework assignments, the flyers for ballet classes and camp. I started asking her about them at the end of our lesson. "What are you reading?" I'd ask. Or the next week, "Did you have a good ballet performance?" I was endeared by her rambling about stories she'd read or how, on account of her being a native French speaker, she found her dance instructor pronounced everything funny. I'd sit and listen for 10, sometimes 15 minutes after our lessons before her sister Chloe would crawl her way up the stairs with parent in tow. I'd hold my hand out for a high five, hers scarcely bigger than my palm. She'd say something in French and give a big, toothy smile. It is a privilege to watch kids grow week by week for so long, to see them in their own element. The slow and gradual change as piano lessons start to click, as music begins to become something they might want to do instead of a chore prescribed by their parents. Sometimes I feel like these lessons are little windows into parenthood. The way you guide this independent, free-thinking being on the path you think is best. The ways they resist and the ways you learn to subvert their aversion. The times they come back and sheepishly admit your advice was right. And then the pride of seeing them grow into achievement. Once, over drinks in the din of a brewery, an adult student of mine recounted the early onset of the pandemic. Motherhood and home ownership and COVID isolation protocols had happened in short succession. Exhausted from moving house, she found herself cross-legged in the attic surrounded by towers of Sharpie-labeled boxes. Illuminated by a square of moonlight, she nursed her daughter against her breast, and the overwhelming anxiety gave way to the resolution that she would be the parent she never had. "I'm not suggesting that you have kids because you think it will magically fix you," she said, tearing up. "But for me, being a mom has been part of healing the trauma I have from my parents." I offered my hand, holding back my own tears at the thought of my own parents and the unanswered question of my own parenthood. My chest welled with the love I had yet to give. Early in college, to help cover the additional expense, I traded nannying a then 4-year-old Tamara for cello lessons from her mom. She would hand me a $20 bill, and we would leave the house for a few hours while she taught lessons. We would get biscuits and jam, coffee for me, and cucumber water for her, at her mother's direction. When time was up at the playground, I convinced her to head home because we had Patience, her stuffed animals, waiting in her room that we needed to see. "We've got to get home stat," she exclaimed, and we raced back up the steep hill at her running pace, a brisk adult walk. Like most toddlers, she sometimes threw tantrums. I remember following after as she tried to run away from me through a crowded university campus. She was upset for some reason only a toddler could fathom, crying, "Go away!" And I was chiefly concerned about keeping her in my sightline, bashful of the optics of chasing an obviously not my small child through a crowd. Sometimes I would watch her on the nights her mom had gigs. We watched Beauty and the Beast, and when Belle appeared clad in her yellow dress, she took my hand and brought me to the closet where she'd had the past year's Halloween costume, the same gown, daffodil and glittering with golden sequins. In the final scene, as Angela Lansbury begins to sing Tale as Old as Time, she asked me to pick her up and spin her around. After giving her half of a melatonin gummy bear, I tucked her into her mother's bed, reading out of books her father, the other half of an ongoing bitter divorce, had sent from France. She would point at the pop-up pictures and tell me it reminded her of something she learned at daycare or pre-K, and the space between questions would lengthen until I could gently get up, as quietly as I could, to turn out the light and close the door. I've always imagined myself as having a daughter. Maybe this is why. Or perhaps it's simply vicarious, as if to reclaim some semblance of a girlhood that is lost to me. The other reasons I can't discern, only acknowledge the symptoms. The slight cerebral envy I have when I see families out, that yearning which undulates beneath my consciousness, the ticking of the proverbial clock. I'm not sure when the change happened. In my youth, I never had an inkling of having children. Maybe it was the change in hormones, now settled on stable levels, the progesterone and the estrogen. The research is slim, but the anecdotes are plenty. Or maybe it's just the process of letting go of the person I thought I had an obligation to be. For a fee, I can indefinitely procrastinate my decision. My gametes are stored in a facility in Colorado. I know the cost of cryo-storage is paltry, especially compared to the cost of my own needs, let alone the needs of a child. But these days, I hardly have a few $100s lying around to spend. Between living as an artist in Seattle and trying to scrape together my business, I'm surprised that I'm afloat at all. Last year, my friends married and closed on a house 5 times the size of my apartment. This year, another tells me of her 5-year plan to earn enough money through a slight career change, eventually culminating in a house and adoption. Dozens of people whose lives diverged from mine since high school graduation have settled into house and home. 30 and thriving, as they say. I have always felt like a late bloomer, as if my life happens 10 years later than it should. Even now, I don't have much to show for myself. But I was always impatient to grow up, the sense of always needing to move to the next thing, as if I was running from yesterday. Now, my womanhood feels truncated, and I'd beg to slow the time to savor. I wonder if, when a monarch emerges from its chrysalis, it has an awareness of newfound freedom, whether or not it knew that its being would be defined by metamorphosis, shedding its first skin, dissolving away parts of its own body before the imaginal discs, awakened by hormonal changes, blossom into its new body. The migratory population of monarch butterflies reaching their overwintering sites has declined with the loss of milkweed, an effect of human development and monocrop agriculture. It is their vital food source. The eggs are laid on the underside of its leaves in hundreds. When hatched, the caterpillars feed on the milkweed until they can pupate. Only 10% will survive climate and predation. The last 2 weeks of summer, Minneapolis. Humid days settling into cool nights. My family called me by my name. Vanity no longer eludes me. I am my mother's daughter. Beauty is a novel relish. I've gotten away somewhere near McAllister and St. Thomas. I'm surrounded by kin. We are dancing, leather boots on the brick. The music is awash from the speakers. Above us, regal orange wings glint through cigarette smoke in the soft glow of bistro lights strung across the small patio. Vague triangles fluttering up and down like monochrome confetti. I've never seen so many butterflies. When I return to Seattle, she picks me up from the airport. White car, black jacket. She steals me into an embrace, and I'm glad to come home. In December, we'll fly south together and trace the migration path of the monarch butterfly to Pismo Beach, and I'll usher in the new year with the acquaintance of her father. In the mornings, while she is asleep, I've taken to reading the news. I've had a strict abstinence from screens in the bedroom, but here is an arbitrary exception. My skin shadow-like, cradled by the porcelain curl of her embrace. The harbor and warmth of her body on cold blue-gray mornings. I skim the headlines from Washington Post, Associated Press, Reuters, The Atlantic, The New York Times. I scroll. The feed keeps going. It has been some months since I have started this writing. The first headlines were Gaza and Palestine, the continued war in Ukraine, the Maduro, the United States intervention in Venezuela, the abduction of immigrants into newly built detention camps, then the murder of Renee Good, then Alex Preddy. The sitting president complicit in a long-hidden child sex trafficking ring documented by the Epstein files. Budding war in Iran. She reaches for my hand. The button under my thumb clicks and the screen flickers out in an instant. I turn around and tuck myself under her chin, face pressed against her chest. I hear her heartbeat. Her breath is steady. I close my eyes and try to let the time slip past. I press my thumb into the valley of her palm, feeling the softness of her hand. As the future perforates, we patch it with contingencies. We talk of the life we'll build.
Bravo, Diane. That's a fantastic piece. Can we give her another round? And I don't know if any of you saw that piece, but really, I would rather read your piece over and over than the article. Thank you. Well, this concludes tonight's reading. It was amazing. Thank you all for fantastic readings and your writing and sharing yourselves with the world. And we'll see you next Friday for our last 4 writers in the anthology. Thank you so much.
Thank you.